When people think about the end of the world, they picture nuclear fire or an asteroid strike. But history shows us that the apocalypse doesn't need to be global to be absolute. Look back 3,000 years to the late Bronze Age. This was an era of titans. The Egyptians, the Hittites, the Mycenaeans, and the Babylonians ruled the known world. They built colossal monuments, commanded massive armies, and lived in unimaginable luxury. But they all shared a fatal flaw. Their entire civilization was built on a fragile web of international trade. And when that web tore, the greatest empires on Earth burned to the ground. Let's set the stage. The lifeblood of this ancient world wasn't money or oil, it was bronze. Bronze was the superpower material of the age. It made their weapons shatterproof, their armor impenetrable, and their tools revolutionary. But to make bronze, you need two things: copper and tin. Copper was common, mostly mined in places like Cyprus. Tin, however, was incredibly rare. It had to be hauled across thousands of miles from distant lands like modern-day Afghanistan or Britain. This meant no single empire could survive alone. They were forced into a massive, hyper-connected global economy. Sound familiar? For centuries, the system worked flawlessly. Merchant ships sailed the Mediterranean, loaded with ingots, spices, gold, and glass. Kings called each other brother in diplomatic letters, negotiating trade deals and royal marriages. It was a golden age of diplomacy and commerce. But complexity breeds vulnerability. When an economy relies on constant, uninterrupted shipping across thousands of miles, any disruption is a disaster. By 1200 BC, the cracks in the foundation began to show. A changing climate brought severe, multi-decade droughts across the eastern Mediterranean. Crops failed. Famines set in. Desperate people began to migrate, looking for food and survival. At the same time, massive earthquakes rocked the region, shattering infrastructure. And then came the final, fatal blow: the Sea Peoples. History doesn't fully know who these mysterious raiders were. They were likely a coalition of desperate refugees and displaced warriors pushed out by the droughts. But what they did is undeniable. They swept across the Mediterranean like a swarm of locusts. They burned the port cities. They destroyed the shipping fleets. And in doing so, they severed the arteries of the Bronze Age economy. Without ships, tin couldn't reach the foundries. Without tin, no bronze could be forged. Without new bronze weapons, the mighty chariot armies of the kings were helpless. The collapse was horrifyingly fast. Within a single human lifetime, a thriving international network fell into darkness. The great Hittite Empire was completely erased from existence. The mighty Mycenaean palaces in Greece were burned and abandoned. Even powerful Egypt was brought to its knees, surviving but permanently crippled. Trade didn't just slow down. It completely stopped. Writing systems were forgotten. Centuries of technological progress vanished overnight. Local economies reverted to primitive farming just to survive. The elites who relied on complex administration and imported luxury lost everything. The whole system imploded because it was too tightly wound to absorb a shock. It was a vicious cycle of systemic failure. The same cycle that threatens every hyperconnected economy today. What does this mean for us right now? It means that complexity is not a substitute for resilience. The Bronze Age kings thought they were invincible because their world was so advanced. Modern leaders think the same about our digitized, globalized world. We don't trade copper and tin on wooden ships anymore. We trade microchips, rare earth metals, and natural gas on massive container vessels. Our supply chains stretch across oceans, relying on just-in-time delivery. We have built the exact same kind of hyperconnected, deeply fragile system. And just like in the Bronze Age, if one crucial node fails, the whole network shudders. A single ship gets stuck in a canal, and global shipping grinds to a halt. A pandemic hits, and supermarket shelves sit empty. A war breaks out, and energy prices skyrocket worldwide. The lesson from 1200 BC is terrifyingly clear. Empires don't just fall to conquering armies. They fall when their supply chains break. They fall when they trade self-sufficiency for the illusion of cheap imports. They fall when the system becomes so complex that no one knows how to fix it when it breaks. History didn't stop teaching after the Bronze Age collapse. The ruins of those ancient palaces are a warning carved in stone. If a society becomes entirely dependent on a fragile system, it will share the fate of that system. So what should you as an individual take away from the greatest systemic collapse in history? First, understand that no system is too big to fail. Second, realize that true security comes from resilience, not just efficiency. Real wealth is having the skills, resources, and community to survive when the global network stumbles. Third, never assume that the comforts of today are guaranteed tomorrow. The Mycenaean kings would have laughed if you told them their grand palaces would soon be ashes. Just as modern elites scoff at the idea that our global supply chains could permanently break. Yet history shows that when the foundation rots, the house always falls. The Bronze Age collapse wasn't just about invaders or bad weather. It was about the fatal trap of total dependence. And that trap is still waiting for us today. History doesn't repeat, but if you don't understand it, it will crush you all the same. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. The past left a trail. I'll show you where it leads.